Hello. Yeah. Good evening. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here. My name is Abdelkader Benali, and I am invited to talk about the whole idea of what it is to be an immigrant in Holland, because in Holland is where I grew up. I come originally from Morocco. I was born in Morocco, and I migrated to Holland in 1979. So I've spent almost all my life in Holland, but that didn't make the question of identity and belonging a lesson. It still is a very big topic, and this surprises me in a way, because I come from a generation which more or less felt itself liberated, or from the idea of that you had to choose if you were a Moroccan or Dutch. There was an idea of openness, there was an idea of multiculturalism, there was an idea of accepting the other as a form of hospitality, obligation, and self-interest, in which the identity of the idea of hybridity, so you could be Moroccan Dutch, a Muslim Moroccan Dutch, whatever, was quite easily absorbed by society. But this idea has changed radically the last 17 years, because 9/11 happened, and we can talk about being an immigrant in Europe before 9/11, and we have to reconsider everything we talk about being an immigrant in Europe before 9/11, after 9/11, radically. The whole concept of belonging, the concept of who you are, the idea of religion has become deeply politicized, has become deeply disturbing, has become deeply polarized in our society. And for me, this is at in one way very problematic, because I have to deal with this on a day-to-day basis. At the other side, it's also very inspiring, because I make my living out of writing, and I'm a writer, and I think that good literature which is exciting, literature that gives insight in human behavior, so which gives us ideas that we can understand what it is to be human. I think the core of literature is conflict, is ideas or thoughts that are in conflict with each other, that are trying to push each other away. And in many ways, the time we're living now, they give me things to think about, and I try to understand it and give it back in my writing. So my writing is very much about the idea of what does it mean to be an immigrant, a Muslim, a hybrid person in Europe nowadays. I come from Holland, and we all know that Holland has a good name, has a very good name, has a very tolerant, multicultural, open society. People love Holland for this. You have that, of course, and we still have these values, and we preach them, and we put them into practice on a day-to-day basis. So when it comes to that, we live in a very in a civil society with a high level of trust in our government, a high level of trust in our free press. We have a high level of trust in our institutions. But at the same moment, when you look at the political field, when you look at what's going on in politics, in standpoints and points of view regarding migration, regarding what it means to be Dutch, what it means to be different, what it means to be, then it almost looks like we're in a kind of civil war. Can
I ask you just
yeah.
at this this point of discussion. So what was it then? This idea of tolerance and multiculturalism and everybody happy, 80s, 90s, and then the terrorist attack in New York and everything changed. So what was it real? Was it just a cover-up story of the Dutch people because of their imperialism? So they have to started to behave very nicely, but in reality, there was something rotten in this, and it was just basically staged thing.
Well, I don't think it was. It was staged in a way of we would perform these rituals of benign understanding of the other and accepting him, etc., etc., because it gave us it gave us, the Dutch, a feeling that we're good people. There was also, of course, a deep self-interest to this, because tolerating someone is also a form of keeping the other in his position. Tolerating someone was also another word for indifference. We call the word indifference onverschilligheid in Dutch, which means you really don't care about who the other is, and you call it tolerance. So, and this model, it did work, because after the Second World War, the Dutch elite had to form a new government and a new way of thinking about the political institutions, because we had all kind of minority groups in Holland emancipating. We had the Protestants, then you had the liberals, and then you had the Catholics, and they were all emancipating a very fast way. And the only way to secure that these groups with total different outlooks on life, on religion, and on economy would that there would be kind of equilibrium, a kind of balance, was to practice tolerance, which meant that in your own group you had your own practices, you had your own religion, etc., etc. But when entering the public sphere, politics, then you would, in a way, leave that behind. You would, and the other one would also leave that behind, and we call that tolerance. You tolerate the other for the common good, for the sake of a nation building. The word for this is verzuiling. We call it pillarification of the society. We call it pillarification of the society. It's a typical Dutch.
Sorry, what is the word?
Pillarification. So you have pillars in society. Okay. So you have the Catholic pillar, you have the Protestant pillar, then you have the Orthodox Protestant
we have
pillar.
3 pillars here too.
That are?
Yeah, here, or in Slovakia. Oh. Social, Catholic. Yeah. What is the third one?
Yeah.
Socially, social, religious, and
liberal maybe, or conservative, Christian
and
Democrat.
National. Sorry.
Yeah. So
we have 3, and you?
We have liberal, socialist, a Catholic, Protestant, and it's quite interesting to see, because all these groups, they had their own churches, but also their own football clubs, their own schools, their own women clubs, their own scouting clubs, their own.
Okay, so is it basically this idea of an atomized society which is being repainted as tolerant just because you have enough money to pay all these clubs?
Well, the whole idea was, of course, that in every pillar you would. The idea was, you do whatever you want in your own club. You know, when it comes to ideology, if you want your children to be Catholic, go ahead. If you want your children to be socialist, go ahead. The government is not interfering in this. But the moment...
Do Dutch people believe that the civil society can be organized?
Well, the whole idea was, we have pillarification, people can do whatever they want, but then we have the elite. So you have the elite, the elite of the Catholics, the elite of the Protestants, the elite of the socialists, and they agree with each other in politics, in democracy, in civil society, how this society should be governed. And there was an understanding between elite and its people, that the people, they trusted the elite, that they would defend their interests, negotiating with the other elite people in government, and so you had all this, because also our democratical system is organized in such a way that you can never have the absolute majority. It's very, very difficult for a Dutch party to have more than half. It's impossible. And even after the Second World War, when you had this big Catholic Protestants group that would vote blindly for their own party, socialists would vote for socialism, Catholic for the. You still could not get a majority, which leads to the fact that you have to negotiate with each other.
Another question, maybe from another context, but do you have a concept of political education in Netherlands?
That's a good question. And we don't have that. No, what we do is we have in a week we have municipality elections in Holland, and what happens in Holland is that 1 month before the municipality election, Dutch television and radio will talk about politics obsessively for 1 month, ad nauseam. So I think when it comes, so the free press, it's called state media, but it's not controlled by the state. It's independent, but it's funded by the state. Will every possible topic will be connected to the municipality elections for 1 month, and I think that's how media is taking care of this political education. But for me, when I went to school, there was no such thing as, well, we had a little bit of, but a little bit of education in politics, but there was no such thing as political education.
So is there a belief, is it or is not there a belief that the schools are platforms for political socialization of young people?
No, because you have, again, when we go back to pillarification, we go back to that there was an understanding that every group takes care of its people. So what you had is, you as a Protestant, you could have Protestant schools. So, and you could teach them the Protestant dogma. As a Catholic, you had Catholic schools. You could teach them Catholic dogma. But what happened, of course, is that in these schools, but also in the football clubs and in the church and so, when election time was coming, everyone would vote for the party of his own group, blindly. So there was no need for political education. And if there was political education, it was also one-sided, always towards just vote for the leader of our party, everything will be okay. You can play football and have your cake and eat it.
Okay. Roger Griffin was talking about populism as the biggest threat nowadays in politics and for the civil society. You said it was very nice when I was young, and then in the last 17 years it all changed. Is this the case? Would you make an argument supporting Roger Griffin that how come the atmosphere can change so quickly because of the events that are not directly related to your, it happened in New York somewhere. Would you say that the case of Holland is an argument for and a good reason for the claim of Roger Griffin that the populism has such a big strength to change the atmosphere in society entirely? I mean, in a couple of months, years.
Roger knows that I totally support his thesis about populism, though he's optimistic, and I'm a little bit more pessimistic. He has reasons to be optimistic. I have my reasons to be pessimistic, but I totally agree that populism is a phenomenon that comes out of what is happening in the world, and it's making strong inroads into mainstream politics, and we have to be aware of this, because we have populism also on the rise in Holland, and they're gaining ground. They're gaining ground not only because they have people voting for them, they find people who vote for them. And they vote for them because they like what the populist parties are saying. These populist parties are strongly anti-immigrant, they're strongly anti-Europe, they're strongly anti-Islam, they're strongly anti-everything. So there's a kind of a nihilistic saying no against the world, because the world is a threat to us, and what they find in what's so appealing and so attractive of these populist parties is that they hit this nerve of existential threat. People feel existentially threatened by an abstract, hot mishmash of European bureaucrats, cappuccino drinking in the center of Bratislava, having Muslim friends, you know. So, and this group is, well, you know, it's threatening things as the nation, it's threatening your job, it's threatening your family, it's making your neighborhood more expensive, so you cannot pay the rent anymore, etc., etc., etc. So these populist parties, they are a danger to civil society because some of their rhetoric is anti-democratical. It goes against the idea of liberalism, against the idea of individualism. But that's a danger, but I'm more afraid of something else, which bothers me much more, which I'm more afraid of, which is that these fringe groups, because most of them are fringe groups, they have 5 to 10% at the ballot, and then most people regard the leaders of these fringe groups, like, I mean, Wilders, he is the second party in Holland. He's the second party in Holland with the last elections, but still most people consider him a little bit a strange person. So and there's a kind of consensus about this. But what I'm more afraid of is that the ideas of these populist parties enter mainstream politics. They enter mainstream politics. They are used, part of the rhetoric that was said 10 years ago by Geert Wilders is now being said by the leaders of our mainstream parties, like the Christian Democrats, the Socialists and the Liberals. They use this rhetoric, and I'm really afraid of it. Because why? I think when you start copying part of the populist rhetoric without having it's destroying your own story. I think it comes out of an inflation of your own story. These mainstream parties, instead of trying to build their own story, to have a strong narrative of what it means to be an individual, what it means to be European, what it means to be part of a greater social texture, they start copy-pasting. And this is the real danger, because this will lead that people lose faith in politics, will lose faith in democracy itself. And we talked about it yesterday about is the specter of fascism going in? Well, we agreed it isn't. But what you have now is something which I call fascism without fascism. You know, hate speech without hate speech. There's a suggestion of fascism. There's a suggestion of hate speech, so that you can always say, yeah, but it's not really fascism. It's not really hate speech, but still there's a kind of feeling that it could be fascism, and this play is very seductive. Okay,
just my last question now. What is this idea of being Dutch that these populists stand for? Like, what is the main value of Dutchness? You know,
I really think we have to redefine the idea of what it means to be Dutch.
My question is what these populists stand for, like what they claim.
The populists, they everything that they can be against is so it's being Dutch because you're against Europe. You know, that makes you Dutch. You're against immigrants. It makes you Dutch. If you ask them what is Dutch, then they have difficulty saying this. They have difficulty really defining what is Dutch, because is it a national anthem? Is it the soccer team? We're not going to the World Championship, so there's no pride in that for now. What is it then? It's very, very difficult because Holland is too small and economically too dependent on the rest of the world to be so narrow-minded about its own nationalism. When you define what it is to be Dutch, it means you're always in contact with foreigners. You're always dealing with others. You have to deal with others. It means that you have an open, transparent economy where the whole world can come and deal with you. You're open to that. It also means that we, as a country, we need Europe. We need Brussels. Brussels is good for Holland. It brings in prosperity. For some reason, and then I go back to existential threat. For some reason, populists have managed to put to build a wall between the facts, the reality, and the myth.
Okay, so what they say, what is the myth? They explain to the voters how did Dutch people came to existence.
Well, they say things like, like Geert Wilders, but also his comrades, like at the next elections we will win, and then we will give the country back to the Dutch.
Yeah.
We'll
okay,
give this rhetoric.
If I ask him,
the thing is, you cannot really disagree with this, But then, because intuitively you think, but it's pure rhetoric. But who took it away then? Where did they bring this country then? And was it locked up somewhere? We gave it back to the Dutch. And then, who are these Dutch people? Who are these Dutch people? You talk about. Are you talking about the Dutch people who live in the big cities? Are you talking about the Dutch people who live in the countryside? There is no thing as Dutch people. There is no homogeneous group where everyone looks alike, and it's pure racist, race-based kind of lunatic. But it can only live. It can only work because I believe this works because our mainstream parties have given the story away. They have no story to tell. They are weak in. They're struggling to divine what it means to be Dutch. They lost this. I think because we thought in the 90s that to think about nation state was a bit old-fashioned. We were going towards the brave new world, European Union, Erasmus bourses, free travel, the zone. We had won. We were high on winning. We thought that our liberal democratic process was winning. So thinking about nationhood was like, that's so silly. We are cosmopolitan. And we forgot there's a strong undercurrent in society that needs the state, that needs nationhood to define itself. And I think mainstream parties, progressive parties, have given up on this, and they now they're now struggling to find to fill this. And I believe that to be Dutch is to love freedom, to love the free press, to have trust in your government, to be also very critical of your government. And I believe that things like going out in the square and having a demonstration for these values is what makes you Dutch, and it's very important.
This is what makes you Slovak also, if you wait a day for tomorrow.
Thank you.
Questions from the audience, if any.
Is it now? Yes. I have one, if I may. I think we are still talking about populism as something nationalistic, right-wing, but I think we are missing a very important part of it, the idea that there is some sort of a plain, simple people and corrupted elites, and the leaders are representing these plain people and are fighting against the corrupted elites. And my question is, can there be a left-wing populism? Because we spend the day talking about right-wing populism, but then can there be a left-wing populism as well?
Yeah, we have that in Holland. We have a party, a political party that is left wing. They want to nationalize banks. They want to go back to. They want to have how you call it, the health system. It has to be nationalized. So they want to nationalize everything, even your free time. And it sounds attractive. It won't work, but they are there. The difference between the two, only the difference between the two that for some look, if you were left wing in the 60s, 70s, 80s, that was cool. It was cool to be left wing. It was really cool to be left wing. It meant something about your position in the world. It meant you were progressive and you were emancipating. You wanted to share the wealth and knowledge and the capital. There was we're going to share this with other people, with other groups, especially the ones that are worse off than we are. Now, in the Western world, to be progressive means to be a right wing, and I don't know what happened there. To be progressive means to be right wing. It means that you want your country to be strong. You want that there are weapons. You want to have this self-defense. You want to. It sounds sexy almost. Oh, I have a gun. You want to see my gun. In Holland, I am amazed by how many fans Putin has. I'm amazed by how part of our middle class group there are people who a couple of days ago we had a radio program. I listen to this every morning, public radio, and they were talking about. The topic was, is a new Cold War coming? And of course, when in this part of the world, people will say, we're already in the Cold War. So it's a total different, but we are a little bit farther away from Moscow. So the ideas, and people would, it was a Fox Pop, people would phone, and they would say, oh, come on, this exaggeration. Leave Mr. Putin alone. He has his own interest. Why are we bothered about Mr. Putin? We should, in a way, actually, we should be sympathetic to him. And I was like, what is happening? What is happening? There's this for 20 years now. This guy who is really not respecting any human right, nothing, and these people. They are benign. What's happening with that right wing and that the love of the strong man and the love of some, and I think it has to do with existential fear and the fact that we see that we are seeing Putin as a kind of welcome ally in the war against Islam. I think there's a very strong idea in Western Europe that the biggest threat is Islam. Look at Steve Bannon, look at Trump, look what's happening in the States. There's a very strong emphasis of that we have to contain Islam, And Putin, he may be a son of a but he is our son of a because he understands the threat of Islam, he is doing something about it, and he will help us. And this goes into this idea of the clash of civilizations. And this, well, fortunately, these developments make right-wing people look progressive.
Okay. We are running out of time, so sorry for.
I will come back and we'll talk
one day.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes. Pustili sme si film, takže naozaj nezostáva veľa času.
We have seen a film, so we have very little time left. The last block, we have already mentioned Putin, Spain and other things, but we didn't speak about Slovakia. I would like to welcome Lýdia Marošiová, who is a researcher. Why are we here? You are teachers here, you are people from NGOs, and this is a broad topic of education, what to do about history, what to do about civics, how the situation looks at our schools. So there are these issues related to the teaching of history, to the teaching of civics, and this is a very broad topic, and it also concerns the attitude, the position situation of young people in relation to extremism. We also touch upon the quality of education. We carried out a research, you carried out a research among young people aged 14 to 17, and I believe that when discussing the issue of extremism, of the influence of the Kotleba party on young people, I think that your research is of extreme significance. I invited Lýdia because we wanted her to speak something about these topics, and then I'll add some of my own observations. We need a microphone. Okay. So I'm not such a good lecturer as Mr. Griffin, so I need to be helped by some technology or slides, I believe. Okay, so we have conducted a qualitative research on the causes of radicalization of youth aged 14 to 17. I would like to point your attention to the institutions that commissioned this research. It was Juventa and Open Society Foundation. They have dealt with the issue in a long term, and they deal with extremism, radicalization, and also the role of education in this respect. I'm not going to give you any theory because I only have some 10 to 15 minutes, so there will be no theory, but I want to put you into the context. Our institute carried out a representative research on what you think when you hear the concept of extremism, and what do you think about when you hear the concept of fascism. The percentage is that 12% of young people, when they hear about extremism, they have in mind especially violence. Also, this is impossible to translate at the speed. Okay, especially giving numbers and anyway. So this is the reality. When people hear about extremism, they relate it to fascism, nationalism, and another survey carried out in 2017, it covered the issue of white race, etc. Up to 40% of young people were asked the question, answering the question of who, concerning the white persons. We have two teachers here with whom we have cooperated in this research. Our sample was composed of all kinds of people, radicals, but also people at the other side of the spectrum. This is an archival picture from a demonstration of neo-Nazis. As you may see, they were using, or their opponents were using the bubble guns against them. So on the one hand, we had extremists. On the other hand, we had activists cherishing ideals of democracy, protection of human rights. We do not have enough time, but let's hear a narrative about a young person, a teenager named Roman. We interviewed Roman in January. He is aged 18. He comes from a small town in central Slovakia. He lives in a reconstructed family during the week with his mother and stepfather and stepsisters, but during the weekend he visits his grandparents in his hometown in central Slovakia. His mother works in a retail store, but she is sick with cancer. And his father has lived practically his entire life as a bodyguard in the countries of Western Europe. Roman visited or attends a secondary school, but he changed schools, and he is very unhappy at the school because of the way they are treated by their supervisors. He wanted to be an actor. This is a utopia, but he has a nice voice, and he wanted to become an actor. But he also elects a certain politician. He attends his meetings where they speak about the Jews and other similar issues. The researcher asked him, I have heard that these radicals organize expeditions to Roma settlements, but the answer was they only do it in those settlements that cause problems. So what is your perception of this? I believe it's good because they are not beating them. They just want to instruct them what they should do. And they do not want to kill them. They just want to tell them their heart. And when we look at it as researchers, we can see that there are some things that point to certain shifts in their values towards radicalism. The narratives that I mentioned.
So these narratives can look like this. The radicals, that are the pink ones, and that is how they were used also by non-radical teenagers. And these narratives were thoughts, concepts that were confirmed because they exchanged them among themselves, and they take it as something, a matter of course. They speak about Slovakia as a small, nice country, good folk culture, historic monuments, etc. And there is bordel in Slovakia. We need order here. Everybody wants to take what they see without asking. We are running into devastation, etc. Another issue is social differences. Common people work from morning till evening. Some people live better. They live in big houses, and the others are very poor. Then seniors is another narrator. In elections, we should limit the right to vote by age. Roma, a person of 25 earns less than Roma who make many children and get money for the children. If this is the parents, their children will be the same. And non-radicals think the same. They should do what we do. They should find work and study. Or the state allow them to have as many children as many they want, and they earn money on this. The neo-Nazist guards, they go to the settlements of Roma only to inform them, to tell them, and an anti-Roma neo-Nazist march. It is good that we have someone to stand up against the bad Roma, and so on. This might be very interesting for teachers of history, narratives about the Jews in the war period. There were only 2 and 3 million of Jews who died, not 6 million. The Slavic nations had much more victims. Or Tiso did something very good for Slovakia, otherwise the country wouldn't exist anymore. Or another narrative of a non-radical. I am not really interested in Slovak history. What do you think? Do you have such students in your classes? Would you have students who would say the same as the statements, the quotations you have seen? Yes, that is, we also ask the teachers. We ask the teachers the same questions. And here you see teenagers who participate in a meeting of the Kotleba People's Party, our Slovakia in Bratislava, and maybe we will see what comes out of them. Who are our young radicals? So we have seen some typical visual signs, but youth experts and teachers told us this. They have different wage, different social background, different look, but they may also look the same as the best students. We have talked with one in a cafe 100 meters from here, a boy like every other boy, and he was one of the most hardcore radicals we have found in our search, in our inquiry. So these are the characteristic features, like they might have problems in school, they want to be different, they want to belong somewhere, they can have psychic, mental, family, etc. problems they are unable to resolve. Now the reasons for radicalization. So we made 40 interviews, and we have identified as one of the reasons for radicalization a specific family situation. The family influence we could detect and register directly. The parents or one of the parents or brothers or sisters are partisans of an extreme political party or members of it. Parents have a strong influence, but the parents are very varied. It's not only simple people. Very often we have very good business people among them, employees of military, police. Some work abroad, including mothers. Some of them work in the community of cars or motorcycles. So they are, and the radicals are very often under the influence of older radicalized siblings. We have also noticed that they don't experience this influence of a functional, complete family. They don't feel this background support. Often they live in incomplete families or with stepfathers or stepmothers. They moved very often. They are often children of parents with lower education, people who work the life of simple people, so to say. They work in agriculture, etc., and many of them live also in poverty. We have also seen that the radical teenagers come very often from families with a disabled member or seriously ill member. They might have also been growing up in a family with authoritative education, alcoholics, violence. So the family is dysfunctional or incomplete, and they have very often a close relationship with their grandparents. So that are the reasons. And another reason is this frustration from the social and political system in Slovakia. So they are very critical to society. They don't trust anyone. They don't like chaos and the moral in the society. They talk about parasites, dirt, garbage, and they feel injustice, corruption. So that is what would be here in the interviews. What does it say? It indicates that they are under ideological influence, because what they said was very similar. They criticize EU and NATO. They say that we have censorship. They have neutral evaluation of the schools they attend. Then there is a very strong political issue, that is the Roma. They could talk about this very long, with a lot of anger, how they are angry that they threaten people, that they steal, that they attack people verbally or physically. They despise the unemployment of Roma. They consider Roma irresponsible parents, and they mind that nobody is addressing the problems and nothing changes for the better. Then there is another issue. and that is migrants. And here, our radicals, the ones we have interviewed, copy the negative feelings in society. So if you want to see the causality of the reasons leading to radicalization of teenagers, so we see family background, the society and the system. Society and the system and its critic would be okay. It is a legitimate objective you want to change for the better. Then the other political issues which are used in a populist way, that is the Roma in the social system, migrants at the border, and then we have something which is this magic solution offered by the extremists in political life. The extremists speak about the change of the system. They want something new. They follow it. They want to vote for a politician who promises this change because what we have is completely dysfunctional. And for you as teacher, this might be of interest, the narratives of teenagers about school. People not go to school to have their school certificate. No, they want to have something in their hands because then they will take their decision. Or I don't talk with my fellow students. I have no issue in common with them. And the neo-Nazis say that usually the non-radicals would say, yes, the neo-Nazis are stupid, or I don't care about other people. And when we ask someone, did you have a supporter of fascism, Nazism, they would answer, yes, I've met them, also adults, also older than me, also my people of my age, people from my neighborhood. I say hello to them, I share a few words, but I am not talking about their views. So I have nothing against it. It's their business, not mine, is what Sergej from Banská Bystrica, age 14, says.
Dobre, ďakujem. Vy ste tu učitelia mnohí, tak...
Many of you are teachers. And maybe you have some questions on this survey. Are the conclusions reflecting what you face at school? According to this school inspection, this should be the picture of 1/6 of the students' population. So do you have a question to Lýdia?
Dobre, tak sa ťa spýtam ja.
So I have a question. You mentioned a lot of issues. What is for you the main memento you will always remember? So what is the one thing from this survey you will remember forever? I was shocked to see that it was very natural, very easy to find these people and to find a strategy how to speak with them. And that is shocking. These children, these teenagers attend schools together with our children. They go sometimes to not the best schools. Many of them know it and they are angry because of it. And they are under strong ideological influence. They are very often in groups of older young people who give them the protective wing, the protective hand. So it is like if there were people who cannot find their place among the same age group. And these groups with older people give them this feeling of belonging somewhere, to be taken care of, and that is how it works. If you something need, just come to me. They give them also money. What is it, a political party which has a very good philanthropic program, and when there is a need, they give money to the families who need it. And the children have suddenly, especially younger children, may take part in different summer camps, something they could never have afforded. They have their tasks, they get pocket money if they something do. So it's a very good ideological system. So Kotleba is a constant in this equation. He's always there. We focused on extremist right wing. He was there as Alpha Omega, who is Mr. Kotleba, whom they follow. My question is, what is a stronger motivation for this admiration of extremism? They were attracted by the negative aspects, being frustrated because of this mess here, or they were more attracted by the feeling of community and belonging to? What is a stronger motivation for young people to join such movements or to admire them? So were they more attracted by the negatives or by the positives? I think the second one, the positive, the feeling of belonging somewhere. And we've compared it. We had the same scripts for the radicals and non-radicals, and the stories were always different. So the others would, I mean the non-radicals would talk about what is concerning their own life, and we always asked why the radicals always address the way or the roads. Why they say, why don't we, they always say, we don't have good roads in Slovakia. So what is it a topic for a young person who cannot drive because he has no driving license, no car, nothing, but they would complain about the roads in Slovakia and their quality. So that would be the main issue for the young radicals. Maybe they are afraid of the they had now an issue and a feeling to belonging to. So I think that this feeling of belong to is very important, and also they believe in the ideology they were presented. Another question, I want to come back to school. They said that school is a negative phenomenon, they don't deal with it at school. Did they mention also particular teachers who would support them in their radical views, or are there any teachers who are positive figures? This was not our issue because it was a survey on the causality, and they said a lot about the schools, and one remark was this: they are like in a cocoon, they don't speak about school, they know that this issue is a taboo at school, you can't speak about it at school, and when they start to confront it, they feel very suppressed, because they would say, I have presented my view on society or the explanation, interpretation of Holocaust, and the teacher would be very angry at me and would oppress me and say that what I say is nonsense. So they get into a cocoon and they are not speaking about it. There is no interaction or relationship with the teacher, and they stop communicating. So their responses were quite divergent, because some of them were, so to say, mediators of this environment and referred in a very positive manner to their teachers, be it humanity or other teachers. So it seemed that they had very good relationship with many teachers, but there were also some who were unhappy with the school. One Bratislava school, for instance, was mentioned as being a total disaster with mildew on the walls and generally a very bad school, and they didn't want to be in the same school because they wanted to change for some better schools which have better equipment, where they would get more attention, etc. So does it mean that teachers do not seem to master their communication with the students? In our research, it was evident that some
are afraid of this topic. Some teachers felt that they are quite deficient because they face a pure, strong ideology and they do not have enough time to cope with it and at the same time to cover the subject matter for their subject. We had a teacher from Eastern Slovakia who said that she has to dampen her pupils in a way because they have so much violence in them or a propensity to fighting with each other, so she had to somehow try to keep them under control. Some teachers were very brave, highly engaged, but they said that either they do not have enough space to deal with it or they do not have the necessary relation with the pupils. Some of them said that yes, the children like to speak if they are offered the space, but they are very reluctant to change their attitude. This is very difficult. Do you have any, let's say, advice what to do in order to improve the situation or to deal with such situation?
Dobre, takže v prvom rade by som povedala,
first of all,
chcem niečo pozitívne, lebo
I would say that I want to achieve something positive. Besides being a history teacher, I also have acted as a principal of one of the biggest schools in Eastern Slovakia in Rožňava. You all know what it means. There is a high percentage of Roma pupils. There is a high percentage of Kotleba voters. The castle of Krasná Hvorka has been burned down 6 years ago, and I want to go back to what Mr. Griffin has said concerning inspection. Unfortunately, being a school principal, I had to face inspectors several times, and I have to confess that the Slovak inspectors are not so much interested in how the pupils in classrooms function, what knowledge we tried to impart on them as teachers, but they only want to know whether our papers are in good order. And this seems to be more important for them than the pupils in our school. So I still want to believe that we, the teachers, go to the school with the best interest of exerting a positive influence on children, which often come from their homes with radical ideas. And I believe that I am a person who simply has to give them the facts, who has to teach them to talk, to speak with one another. And I also want my teachers to do the same. Let the children speak out, speak their mind, and do not try to change something in their heads forcefully. Just give them an opportunity, a space to speak. Speaking about such issues as Judaism and other things, each year we take our 9th graders either to Auschwitz, and since a Jewish museum was opened in Sered in Slovakia, we also go there. We also go to the monument in Banská Bystrica, and I believe that one such trip to Auschwitz replaces one entire teaching block because once the children have been on the spot, they will never laugh when we would discuss the topic. But what did happen and what makes me really sad is that in some families this topic is bagatelized and by parents, and therefore the children also bagatellize the issues related to extremism. I believe that we as teachers, and I am sorry to say that if your research was carried out in our school, the results would probably be very similar. But we want to give the children another option, another possibility, something different from what they have learned at home. So I believe that this cause is not lost. Tomorrow there's going to be a meeting in the streets, a demonstration. I will attend one in Rožňava, in my town. So I would like to say that we should all be there, and we should all teach our children how to take a position when they are attacked by others, by people who may feel differently. I am very thankful to all of you for allowing me to talk to you, to be here, because I have learned something about the Netherlands, because I have to confess my information was a little distorted. Mr. Griffin, chapeau bas, I thank you very much for everything you have told us. I am very happy that I could be here, and thank you all. Let me ask you a few things. You said that you are a school principal and that you talk to pupils. Do you have a systemic tool to do this, such as a readers club or some informal activity, or do you have time to do this during your regular classes? My second question. Social psychologist Jana Plichtova said yes, fascists are brought up by their families in most cases, but they can be changed. What do you think about a regular school, state school in Slovakia? Do you think that there is a chance for this school to change or to instill new values to the minds of pupils which differ from those they bring from homes? We at our school have a very active special interest clubs, like we have a history club, readers club, but not only humanity teachers deal with such topics, not only history teachers, but also at classroom meetings we discuss them. For instance, young boys are coming to talk to me, even parents who want to speak about their children because their child would say at home that the principal said at school that this was not the way that you told us, and we also have to deal with the ethnic card because some of them are ethnic Hungarians. So we do discuss these issues using every opportunity, not only in the classroom. We also have the so-called project days devoted to the prevention of risk behavior. We have discussions with police officers, for instance, focused on prevention. And the question whether it is possible to change the opinion or the attitude of these young people, I believe it is possible, because when I meet my former pupils 10 or 15 years later as adults, we speak very openly, and they can be very open and say very openly that at the time I did not understand it and I had some strange feelings about you, but now that I have my own children, I can see that you were right. So we do believe that the initiative that we take at the school will bring its results. We only have a few more minutes left. And I would like to ask Roger, who's been listening very attentively to all that's going on here, I would like to ask him for his very brief response. 5 minutes, Roger. Or maybe even less than 5 minutes.
Yes, I hear very brief. I find it fascinating. I thought the last intervention was really interesting. History, not as the past, but as the lived present. The teaching aids, Auschwitz as a teaching aid, having different ethnic groups in your own school and trying to create links between them. If you take every situation where there are tensions all over the world, if you take, for example, America, blacks and whites, etc., the crucial thing is to break down these barriers. In the Gaza Strip, in Palestine, and in Israel, there are initiatives to use music. They have a common orchestra where people play instruments from the two communities, and they create an orchestra. Kafka once said, "Erst im Chor kann eine gewisse Wahrheit sein." Only in the choir may there be a little truth. So if you can artificially almost create situations which are not about teaching and indoctrination and theory, but you create social human situations where people experience the other as a fascinating difference. You make difference fascinating. You have common experiences. The tragedy of Northern Ireland was that the government allowed separate schooling for Catholics and Protestants for far too long. You could have used the two communities to actually talk about the two different histories, reconciling the history of being a Catholic Irish person with roots in pre-British Ireland and British Ireland. There are different histories, reconciling histories, using, like in South Africa, to be a black South African, you have a different history than a white South African. But you can use history as a way of making people fascinated with otherness, so it is no longer threatening. These people are suffering from anomie, of not knowing who they are and what they are, and therefore they project their fears onto the other. But the other can be used as a way of enriching your sense of self. And so I really would say that you are not alone. All over the world you will find in each society potentials for hatred, destruction, violence, and potentials for creating in microcosm a humanistic society which uses otherness. And I find it, for example, fascinating that when you talked about Holland, you talked about we, and yet you are both Moroccan and presumably Muslim or post-Muslim, but you're also Dutch, and you're also European, and you're also a writer, and your books are probably translated into different languages, and we belong to all these communities. And so as long as it is disturbing, it is threatening, but as long as you all use the resources that you have to move towards this goal, I think you have one of the most beautiful careers in the world. And every time you give people the tools because maybe we want to see the revelation and the change now. Maybe you are sowing seeds which, when they're in their 20s or in their 30s, when they fall in love with a woman, with a Roma woman, or they suddenly see a Hungarian differently, what you have sown will come. We shouldn't be too impatient, and we must keep trying. T.S. Eliot, our poet, says, "Ours is only the trying, the rest is not our business." So we must just keep trying. And the fact that you are here and you're going to be protesting tomorrow and trying to make your government better, I come back from Slovakia inspired, and I think Britain has a lot to learn. So thank you very much.
I don't want to spoil the party, but we have a new government which nobody wants around here, but let's see what comes out tomorrow. No, that's
At
not.
least you're not killing people. You've got soldiers in the streets. You haven't got tanks coming in. This is not the Prague Spring. You are not having people being tortured. This is democracy. Democracy is a mess. It's not meant to be nice, but at least you've got to a point where you do not have terrible things happening. You're not in Putin's Russia. People are not being killed with polonium and nerve agents in the streets. So enjoy the mess. Yeah? Enjoy the mess.
Thank you very much, Roger Griffin. Yeah.
Len to posledné.
Just the last word. Thank you very much that you have given us this day. Thank you, Roger. Abdelkader is just leaving, I think. No, Abdelkader is here.
Thank you, Abdelkader. I see you very soon.
Stretneme sa, dúfam, čo najskôr.
I go back inspired.
Ďakujem, Fedor. Ďakujem skvelému tlmočeniu, tradične. A dúfam, že bude príležitosť, aby sme sa uvideli znovu a pokračovali. A nevzdali to. Ďakujem, že to nevzdávate. Dovidenia. Šťastnú cestu domov.